March 17th, 1945. The frozen mud fields outside Elsdorf, Germany. Oberleutnant Klaus crouches in the commander's cupola of his Panzerkampfwagen Tiger II, the King Tiger, scanning the tree line through his optics. His tank weighs 70 tons. Its frontal armor measures 7.1 inches thick. The 88mm KK-43 L-71 gun, extending from his turret, can defeat any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards. He knows this. His crew knows this. Every Panzer School instructor has drilled this truth into German tank commanders since late 1944. The King Tiger is invincible. And then, through the morning haze at approximately 1,800 yards, nearly a mile away, Weber sees it. A shape he does not immediately recognize. Lower profile than a Sherman. Different turret silhouette. The long gun gives it away. American, certainly, but not the usual Shermans his unit has been encountering for months. He ranges it. 1,800 yards, far beyond effective range for a 75mm Sherman. He is safe. The Americans will have to close to under 1,000 yards before they pose any threat. Standard doctrine: let them approach, destroy them methodically. His gunner, a veteran named Ernst Hoffmann, acquires the target. What Weber does not know, what he cannot know in this moment, is that in approximately 90 seconds, his understanding of armoured warfare, his confidence in German technological superiority, his faith in the invincibility of the King Tiger, all of it, is about to be shattered by a single shot from a tank that the American army only began deploying in significant numbers 3 months ago. Within 6 weeks, when Allied intelligence officers interview captured King Tiger commanders, they will hear the same phrases repeated over and over. Disbelief, shock, the impossible distances. One commander, his name redacted in the declassified documents, will tell his interrogators something that sounds absurd. We stopped believing our armor protected us. We started believing we were already dead, just waiting for the shot that would prove it. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. This is the story of the M26 Pershing, the tank that arrived too late to change the war, but just in time to change how German tankers understood it. More importantly, this is the story of what happened when German panzer doctrine built on 5 years of battlefield superiority collided with American industrial capacity, turned fully toward producing not just adequate tanks, but genuinely superior ones. The M26 Pershing entered combat in February 1945, 43 tons. A 90mm main gun derived from anti-aircraft artillery, frontal armor measuring 4 inches thick on the turret, nearly 4 inches on the glacis plate. On paper, it was America's answer to the Panther and the King Tiger. On the battlefields of Western Germany in the final months of the war, it became something more. It became the physical manifestation of a truth that German commanders had been trying not to confront since the Normandy invasion. That American industrial capacity was not just producing more tanks, it was producing better ones. That the technological gap Germany had depended on was closing. That time, which the Wehrmacht needed desperately, had run out. To understand why the Pershing's 90mm gun penetrating King Tiger armor at 1,800 yards destroyed more than metal, you need to understand what the King Tiger represented to German panzer forces in late 1944 and early 1945. The Panzerkampfwagen VI OSB, the King Tiger, entered service in May 1944. It was the heaviest operational tank of World War II. Its armor was virtually impenetrable to standard Allied tank guns at normal combat ranges. The 88mm KWK-43 could destroy any Allied tank from distances that made return fire impossible. German panzer doctrine by 1945 had adapted to overwhelming Allied numerical superiority through a simple principle. Make every shot count from maximum range. Use superior optics, superior gunnery training, and superior penetration to kill Allied tanks before they could close to effective range. Trade quality for quantity. One King Tiger, properly positioned, could theoretically hold off an entire Allied tank company. This was not propaganda, this was mathematics. Verified by combat after combat in France, Belgium, and Western Germany throughout the second half of 1944, the British 17-pounder, mounted on Sherman Fireflies, could penetrate King Tiger side armour at moderate ranges, but struggled against frontal armour beyond 600 yards. The Soviet 85mm gun on the T-34-85 could penetrate King Tiger side armour, but was ineffective against frontal armour except at point-blank range. The American 75mm Sherman gun was essentially useless against King Tiger frontal armour at any practical combat range. So, German King Tiger commanders, despite being outnumbered, despite fuel shortages, despite increasingly green crews, still possessed one absolute advantage: invulnerability at range. A 1945 Panzer training manual, captured near Paderborn, explicitly states, "The King Tiger's armour provides safety at ranges exceeding 1,000 metres against all known enemy anti-tank weapons. Commanders should exploit this advantage through long-range engagement." That word, safety, remember it. Oberleutnant Heinrich Fischer commanded a King Tiger with the 512th Heavy Panzer Battalion. His after-action report from March 23, 1945, declassified in 1973, describes his first encounter with a Pershing near Cologne. "We occupied a hull-down position overlooking the approach road. Range to target, approximately 1,600 metres. Excellent visibility. The American tank, later identified as an M26, appeared from behind a destroyed building. I ordered Hauptmann Bauer to engage. His first shot struck the enemy tank's turret front. We observed impact, no penetration, no visible damage. Before Bauer could reload, perhaps 5 seconds, the American tank fired. I saw the muzzle flash. I felt the impact through the entire vehicle. The shot penetrated our frontal turret armour, travelled through the turret basket, killed Bauer instantly, wounded our loader, and exited through the rear turret plate. 1,600 metres. Frontal penetration. Through 7.1 inches of face-hardened steel, I ordered immediate withdrawal. We abandoned the tank 300 metres from the initial position when the engine failed. All surviving crew escaped on foot. 1,600 metres, just under 1 mile. Fischer's report continues. I have commanded panzers since 1941. I fought in Russia. I fought in France. I believed our armour provided protection. I believed we could engage safely at range. After Cologne, I believed nothing. The mathematics of survival had changed, and we had not been informed. That phrase appears in multiple German reports from this period. The mathematics of survival had changed. Because here is what the Pershing's 90mm gun could do. The M3 armour-piercing shot, standard ammunition for the Pershing, could penetrate approximately 5 inches of steel at 1,000 yards. At 1,500 yards, penetration dropped to approximately 4 inches. But the King Tiger's turret front, while nominally over 7 inches thick, had welds and joins that created weak points. More critically, the face-hardening process that made German armour so resistant to the standard shells made it brittle against the kinetic energy of the Pershing's high-velocity 90mm round. U.S. Army ordnance tests conducted at Aberdeen Proving Ground in April 1945, using captured King Tiger components, demonstrated that the M3 round could defeat King Tiger frontal turret armour at ranges exceeding 1,800 yards under optimal conditions. German tankers had been taught this was impossible. They had been taught that Allied tank guns lacked the velocity, the penetration, the sophistication to threaten King Tiger frontal armour at extended range. They had been taught that their armour was safety. They had been taught that they could trade space for kills, fall back methodically, use range as a weapon. And now, in the final weeks of the war, they were discovering that safety was an illusion, that the Americans had not just produced more tanks, they had produced tanks that could kill King Tigers from distances that German doctrine said were safe. Hauptmann Otto Schneider, interviewed by British intelligence in June 1945, described the psychological impact. We were not prepared for this. Not the tank itself, but what it represented. For 5 years, we had possessed technological superiority in armour. The Panzer III was superior to anything the Allies fielded in 1940. The Panzer IV dominated until 1943. The Panther and Tiger gave us advantages even when outnumbered 10-1. We accepted losses. We accepted being outnumbered. But we believed, truly believed, that our engineering, our design, our technological sophistication would always give us an edge. That edge was everything. It was why we could still fight. It was why losses were acceptable. It was why we could believe we might survive. The Pershing did not just penetrate our armour. It penetrated our certainty. The first Pershings arrived in Europe in January 1945, just 20 tanks, a token force assigned, to the 3rd and 9th Armoured Divisions. German intelligence noticed them immediately. A Luftwaffe reconnaissance report from February 8, 1945 notes, "New American heavy tank observed near Aachen, estimated weight 40 to 45 tons, long barrel main gun, possibly 90mm caliber. Recommend immediate engagement to assess capabilities." That assessment came at Elsdorf. Staff Sergeant Robert Early commanded a Pershing named Fireball with the 3rd Armoured Division. His combat report, filed March 6, 1945, is remarkably detailed. At approximately 09:30 hours, our platoon advanced through Elsdorf, visibility good. We received fire from a concealed position, later identified as a King Tiger, at estimated range of 1,900 yards. The round passed over our tank. I ordered our gunner, Corporal Clarence Smoyer, to acquire the target. Smoyer ranged it, 1,800 yards, maybe a bit more. I told him to fire when. Ready. He fired. I observed the tracer. It struck the King Tiger's turret front, slightly left of centre. The German tank did not move, did not fire again. We advanced. When we reached the position, the crew was abandoning the vehicle. The round had penetrated completely. The tank was combat ineffective. 1,800 yards. I did not believe it myself until I walked the distance and measured it. 1,800 yards, give or take, through the thickest armour Germany produced. Smoyer's shot, captured on film by an Army combat camera crew, became one of the most analysed tank engagements of the war, not because it was particularly dramatic, but because it represented something unprecedented. For the first time in World War II, an American tank had destroyed a German heavy tank at ranges comparable to what German guns could achieve. The advantage of reach, which had sustained German panzer forces through 2 years of numerical inferiority, had evaporated. German after-action reports from March 1945 show a pattern of escalating concern. Unit commanders began reporting that King Tigers could no longer engage American armour with confidence at ranges previously considered safe. Defensive doctrines that relied on long-range engagement began to collapse. A March 19th report from the 512th Heavy Panzer Battalion states, "Engagement ranges must be reduced to under 1,000 metres to ensure penetration of enemy armour." However, this exposes our vehicles to effective return fire from the new American heavy tank, requests immediate guidance on revised tactical doctrine. No guidance came. Germany was weeks from surrender. There was no time to revise doctrine, no resources to retrain commanders, no fuel to manoeuvre, no replacements to absorb losses. The Pershing had arrived too late to change the strategic outcome of the war, but it had arrived just in time to destroy the last psychological advantage German panzer forces had possessed. Lieutenant Werner Hoffmann, captured near Kassel in April 1945, told his interrogators, "The Americans always had numbers. They always had support, artillery, air power, logistics. We accepted this. We learned to fight outnumbered. But we believed our tanks were superior, not just better equipped, but fundamentally superior in design, in capability, in survivability." The Pershing was not dramatically better than the Panther or King Tiger, but it was equal, and equal was unacceptable. Equal meant we could not trade quality for quantity. Equal meant every engagement was a fair fight, and we could not afford fair fights. We needed superiority to survive. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. By April 1945, over 300 Pershings had reached European battlefields. Not enough to replace the thousands of Shermans that formed the backbone of American armored divisions, but enough to fundamentally alter German tactical calculations. German tankers began reporting something unprecedented: hesitation. Men who had fought for years, who had faced overwhelming odds in Russia and France, who had developed reputations for aggressive counterattacks, were now pausing before engaging American armor at range, because they could no longer distinguish a Pershing from a Sherman at extended distances. The silhouettes were similar enough that identification required close examination, and close examination meant closing to ranges where the Pershing's 90mm gun was absolutely lethal. Oberst Hans Joachim Jung commanded remnants of the Panzer Lehr Division in April 1945. His interrogation transcript, declassified in 1987, reveals the paralysis this created. We observed American tanks approaching our positions near Dessau, range, approximately 2,000 meters. In previous engagements, we would have waited until 1,500 meters, then engaged with confidence. But now, we had to ask ourselves, are these Shermans or Pershings? If Shermans, we have the advantage. If Pershings, we are vulnerable. We could not determine this at 2,000 meters. Our optics were excellent, but the profiles were too similar at that distance. So we had two choices: engage immediately and risk revealing our position to a tank that could kill us before we could confirm the kill, or wait for positive identification and sacrifice the range advantage we desperately needed. We waited. We always waited now. And waiting meant the Americans closed to ranges where numerical superiority mattered more than technical superiority. We lost the initiative. Once you lose the initiative in armored combat, you lose everything. This was the Pershing's real impact, not the relatively small number of German tanks it destroyed directly, but the psychological effect it created across the entire panzer force. German tactical doctrine in 1945 relied on maximizing the effectiveness of each remaining tank. With fuel critically short, with replacement vehicles non-existent, with crew training minimal, the doctrine emphasized patience. Let the enemy approach, engage at maximum range, fall back to the next position, repeat. But the Pershing made patience dangerous, because patience meant allowing American tanks to close to ranges where a Pershing could destroy a King Tiger with the first shot. Hauptmann Friedrich Steinhardt commanded a King Tiger during the defense of the Ruhr Pocket. His after-action report from April 14, 1945, describes a level of stress German tankers had not previously experienced. We occupied a prepared position overlooking the main approach route. Excellent fields of fire, range to the tree line, approximately 1,800 meters. Perfect ambush position under previous doctrine. At 1100 hours, American armor appeared, 4 tanks initially. I ranged the lead vehicle, 1,800 meters. But I could not positively identify the type. The turret suggested Pershing, but I was not certain. I did not order fire. I waited for the tanks to close to 1,400 meters, where I could be certain. But by 1,400 meters, if they were Pershings, they could engage us effectively. I was trapped by indecision. The Americans advanced to 1,200 meters before I finally ordered engagement. We destroyed 2 Shermans. The third tank, a Pershing, destroyed our King Tiger with a single shot through the turret front. Range, approximately 1,100 meters. I survived because I was partially out of the cupola. My gunner, my loader, and my radio operator did not survive. We had sacrificed our range advantage through hesitation. Hesitation killed my crew more certainly than enemy shells. This is what American ordnance engineers at the Detroit Arsenal had unknowingly created. Not just a tank that could match German armor, but a tank that looked similar enough to the Sherman to create fatal uncertainty in German tank commanders who had previously engaged with confidence. The M26 Pershing weighed 43 tons, compared to the Sherman's 30 tons. But at combat ranges, through optics or binoculars, that weight difference was invisible. The turret profiles were similar, the hull shapes were comparable. Only the longer 90mm gun clearly distinguished them, and even that could be difficult to judge at 1,500 yards or more. German recognition training manuals from early 1945, captured by Allied forces, show desperate attempts to help crews distinguish Pershings from Shermans. Silhouette charts, detailed measurements, key recognition features. But these manuals assumed good visibility, proper angles, sufficient time to study the target. Combat provides none of these luxuries. Feldwebel, Anton Gresser, a veteran panzer commander who survived the war, described the practical reality in his memoir published in 1978. The manuals told us how to identify a Pershing. Look for the longer gun. Note the different turret casting. Observe the suspension differences. All of this was useless in actual combat. You see movement through trees at 1900 meters in morning fog. You have perhaps 10 seconds to decide. Engage or wait. The gun looks long, but all American tank guns look long compared to our older Panzer IVs. The turret looks different, but you are observing at an angle through vegetation at nearly 2 kilometers distance. Do you fire and reveal your position, or do you wait for certainty and sacrifice your advantage? Every decision was wrong. Every choice led to death. Fire too early at a Sherman that could not threaten you. Waste ammunition. Reveal your position to Pershing that could kill you. Wait too long for identification. Allow a Pershing to close to lethal range. We had fought for years knowing we could be killed, but we had also known we could kill first if we fought smartly. The Pershing took away the "if we fought smartly" part. Now we could just be killed, regardless of how smartly we fought. Let me give you the numbers that explain what this meant at a strategic level. Between February and May 1945, approximately 310 Pershings saw combat in Europe. They destroyed an estimated 53 German tanks confirmed, with perhaps another 30 probable kills. 53 confirmed kills. In a war where thousands of German tanks had been destroyed, 53 is statistically insignificant. But those 310 Pershings created uncertainty across the entire Panzer force. Every engagement with American armor now carried the possibility that one of those tanks was a Pershing. Every long-range shot carried the risk that return fire would come from a 90mm gun that could penetrate King Tiger armor at ranges German doctrine said were safe. German unit commanders began filing reports that sound like they were written by men who had lost faith in their equipment. Not because the equipment was bad, the King Tiger remained a formidable weapon, but because the certainty was gone. A report from the 2nd Panzer Division, dated April 20th, 1945, states, "Crews demonstrate decreased willingness to engage enemy armor at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. When ordered to engage at extended range, crews request confirmation that targets are not M26 type heavy tanks. This hesitation results in lost tactical opportunities and decreased combat effectiveness. Recommend immediate distribution of improved recognition training materials and clarification of engagement doctrine against M26 tanks." The division was encircled and destroyed 6 days later. No improved training materials arrived. No revised doctrine was issued. Germany had run out of time to adapt. But here is what haunts me about these reports. These were not poorly trained conscripts or defeated men looking for excuses. These were veterans, men who had survived years of combat, men who had fought against overwhelming odds in Russia and France, men who had learned to function under stress that would break most soldiers. And the Pershing had broken their certainty. Not through overwhelming firepower or massive numbers, but through something more subtle and more devastating. It had made them doubt the one advantage they still possessed. Oberleutnant Paul Semmler, interviewed in July 1945, tried to explain this to his British interrogator. You have to understand what the King Tiger represented to us by 1945. It was not just a weapon, it was proof that German engineering still mattered, that we still possessed advantages, that quality could still overcome quantity, that we could still fight effectively despite everything. When we learned that American tanks could penetrate King Tiger armor at 1800 meters, it was not just tactical information. It was the final proof that we had lost the technological war. Not just the production war, we knew we lost that in 1943. Not just the resource war, we knew that from the beginning. But the technological war. The one area where we believed we still possessed superiority. The Pershing was not a better tank than the King Tiger in most respects. But it was good enough. And good enough from America. With their unlimited production capacity, their unlimited resources, their unlimited ability to train crews and provide support, good enough was better than our best. That is what broke us. Not that we were inferior, but that our superiority no longer mattered. Now, let me show you something that American crews discovered about the Pershing that German intelligence never fully understood. Something that made the 90mm gun even more devastating than German tankers realized. The M3 armor-piercing shot was good, capable of penetrating King Tiger armor at remarkable ranges under optimal conditions. But the Pershing also fired a round designated T-33 and later M82, the armor-piercing capped ballistic cap round. This round had a hardened penetrator tip covered by a soft metal cap that prevented shattering against face-hardened armor, topped with a ballistic cap that improved flight characteristics. Against the brittle face-hardened armor used on King Tiger turret fronts, the T-33 was extraordinarily effective. US Army test data from May 1945 shows that the T-33 could defeat King Tiger turret armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards under favorable conditions. 2,000 yards. Over a mile. Beyond the range where German optics could reliably identify whether they were facing a Sherman or a Pershing, Staff Sergeant Nicholas Palermo, commanding a Pershing with the 9th Armored Division, described the practical effect in his combat memoir published in 1992. We hit a King Tiger at what I later measured as 2,100 yards. I did not believe we could penetrate at that range. I was just hoping to drive him into cover, make him reposition, buy time for our infantry to advance. The round hit his turret. I saw the impact through my optics. The King Tiger stopped, did not move again. When we reached the position 3 hours later, the crew had abandoned it. Our round had penetrated the turret front, entered the fighting compartment, and rendered the tank combat ineffective. 2,100 yards. The Germans had no idea we could reach out that far. Neither did we, honestly. But after that engagement, we started taking longer shots, and they kept working. German intelligence officers, the few still functioning in April 1945, tried to determine the Pershing's actual effective range against heavy armor. The estimates varied wildly. Some reports suggested 1,200 meters. Others suggested 1,800. A few mentioned ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, but dismissed these as exaggerations or lucky shots. They never arrived at accurate figures because they never had time. The war ended before comprehensive testing could be conducted, before sufficient engagement data could be compiled, before revised tactical doctrines could be distributed. Hauptmann Dietrich König commanded a King Tiger during the final weeks of the war. His interrogation, conducted in June 1945, reveals the chaos this uncertainty created. We received multiple different reports about the American M26. One said it could penetrate our frontal armor at 1,000 meters. Another said 1,500. Another said 2,000. We did not know what to believe. Without accurate intelligence, we had to assume the worst. We had to assume that every American tank might be a Pershing, and every Pershing could kill us at any range where we could see them. This assumption made coherent tactical planning impossible. Our doctrine for the previous year had been built on range advantage. Engage at maximum distance. Use superior optics and gunnery to achieve first-round kills. Fall back before the enemy could close to effective range. Repeat. But if the enemy could kill you at the same ranges where you could kill them, the entire doctrine collapsed. And we had no replacement doctrine. We had no time to develop one. We simply fought as best we could and hoped our armor would protect us, even though we knew it might not. That phrase keeps appearing in these interrogations. We knew it might not. The certainty was gone. The mathematics of survival had become probability rather than calculation. By late April 1945, Germany was collapsing. Fuel was non-existent. Ammunition was rationed. Replacement vehicles were not arriving. Crews were increasingly inexperienced. The Pershing was only one factor among many contributing to the defeat of German armoured forces. But it was a factor that carried psychological weight far beyond its numbers, because it represented the final closing of the technological gap, the final proof that American industry could produce not just adequate weapons, but excellent ones. The final evidence that German engineering advantages, the last thing panzer forces could still claim superiority in, had evaporated. Oberst Werner Drews, a senior panzer officer who survived the war and later wrote extensively about German armour tactics, reflected on the Pershing's impact in a 1968 interview. The Pershing was a good tank, not revolutionary, not dramatically superior to our best designs. But it was good enough, and America could build it in numbers we could not match while maintaining quality we could not achieve under our circumstances. More importantly, it arrived at exactly the moment when we needed to believe we still possessed advantages. When that belief was stripped away, it took something essential from us. Not courage, our men fought bravely to the end. Not skill, our veterans remained highly capable. But hope. The hope that quality could somehow overcome quantity, that expertise could defeat industrial capacity, that we might survive through superiority rather than simply through luck. The Pershing taught us that we had no superiority left, only luck, and luck runs out. The M26 Pershing saw limited combat in World War II. Only 310 tanks reached Europe before Germany's surrender. They achieved a favourable kill-to-loss ratio, destroying more enemy armour than they lost, but their statistical impact was minimal. Their psychological impact was immeasurable. In post-war interviews, German panzer commanders consistently rated the Pershing as the Allied tank they feared most. Not because it was the most common, the Sherman vastly outnumbered it. Not because it was the most deadly, Soviet heavy tanks probably killed more German armour overall, but because it represented the end of hope. The Sherman, German tankers could rationalise. Yes, it was effective, but primarily through numbers and support. The Sherman was dangerous because there were so many, because they were well supported, because American combined arms doctrine was excellent. But the Sherman itself, as a machine, was not superior to German heavy tanks. The Pershing was different. The Pershing, tank for tank, could match a King Tiger, could penetrate its armour at ranges comparable to what the King Tiger could achieve, could be produced in numbers that Germany could never match while maintaining quality that equalled German standards. The Pershing was proof that American industry had solved the problem of producing genuinely excellent heavy tanks at scale. And if they could solve that problem in early 1945, what could they produce in 1946? In 1947? German commanders looking at Pershings in April 1945 were not just seeing the tank in front of them. They were seeing the future, a future where American technological capability matched their production capacity, where German advantages in design and engineering no longer compensated for disadvantages in resources and industry. They were seeing a future where Germany could not win, could not even fight effectively, could only lose, slowly and inevitably, ground down by an enemy that possessed both quality and quantity. Some of them had suspected this since Normandy, some since Stalingrad, some since even earlier. But the Pershing made it undeniable, made it concrete, made it something you could see and measure and calculate. Lieutenant Werner Rahn, captured in the Ruhr pocket, put it simply, "When I saw my first Pershing, I knew we had lost. Not lost the battle, not lost the campaign, lost the war. Lost it years ago, probably, but I could finally see it clearly. America had built a tank as good as ours, and they would build thousands of them while we could build dozens. The mathematics were undeniable. The war in Europe ended May 8, 1945. By that point, Pershings had been in combat for just over 3 months. They had proven themselves effective. They had earned the respect of their crews and the fear of their enemies. They had achieved everything asked of them, but their real victory was not measured in destroyed tanks or won engagements. It was measured in the despair of German tank commanders who realized that the last advantage they possessed had disappeared. In the decades after the war, the Pershing would be largely forgotten, overshadowed by the Sherman, which won through sheer numbers and reliability, overshadowed by later American tanks like the M48 Patton, which incorporated lessons learned from the Pershing's design, overshadowed by the dramatic stories of tank battles in Normandy and the Bulge. But to the German tankers who faced it in the final weeks of the war, the Pershing was unforgettable, not because it was the most dangerous weapon they encountered, but because it was the weapon that destroyed their last hope. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.